On this channel, I do my best to help PAs and NPs find their fit in medicine. Hi, it's Michelle with the Medicine Couch. Welcome to this week's video where we're going to dive into another specialty to see if it might be a good fit for you. The specialty today is going to be psychiatry or psych, and this is a specialty that I think is often overlooked, either because people just don't really consider it for whatever reason, or because they have some preconceived notions or misconceptions about what the specialty is really like. Today I'm going to be interviewing a PA. His name is Mike Asbach, and he is going to tell us about his experiences in psych. He's been working in this specialty for a long time, and he really loves it. He really thinks it's a specialty that gives just about the best work-life balance in medicine and also pays really well. Mike is also interesting because he runs a podcast called The White Coats of the Round Table. Very creative, unique name. So stick around to the end of the interview. We're going to talk about the White Coats of the Round Table a little bit more and find out what this podcast is all about. I'm really enjoying finding out about all these different areas of medicine, and I hope you are too. Please help the channel out by hitting that subscribe button, hitting the like button if you like this video, and leaving me a comment down below.
Hi everyone, my name's Mike Asbach. I'm a Psych PA up in Buffalo, New York. I serve as the Associate Director of Interventional Psychiatry at Dent Neurologic Institute. I'm also the co-host and founder of the White Coats of the Round Table podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to have you here today.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what is interventional psych? Because I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's fun. So interventional psychiatry is an emerging field of behavioral health, and it's really focused on the hands-on interventions or hands-on procedural work. So I spend about half of my clinical time doing ketamine infusions, intranasal ketamine, and TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. And then the other half of my clinic time is spent doing traditional med management appointments with an outpatient clinic.
Now, have you worked in psych since you graduated, or did you do some other specialties before you found your way into psych?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2012, and interestingly, I thought I was going to work in orthopedics or emergency medicine, and I did my rotations in those fields, and I enjoyed it. But at the same time, I also identified it's like, this is fun, but I don't know if I want to do work 60 hours a week the rest of my life. I don't know if I want to be called in on Christmas Eve for a fracture. Even though I enjoyed it, I recognized already early on in the process that maybe this wasn't a career option in terms of something that I wanted to do for 40 years and have the work-life balance that I wanted. So I there was a job posting online for psychiatry, and I had spent time in the military, so I had an interest in mental health just from a PTSD and veteran population, those types of things. So I applied on a flyer and fell in love with it within 5 minutes of my first interview.
That's great. I love these stories, and I love to ask people, what did you think you were going to do when you went into PA school, and what are you doing now? Because so many times they are completely different, and often specialties that people said I'd never even considered.
I think it's a good point for people of, you may have an idea of what you want to do, but be open to alternatives. Only 2% of PAs go into psych, and a lot of times when people come in our office, they say, I never expected this to be so fun or so interesting. So, if students are watching, be open, because you may fall in love with a specialty that you weren't even thinking of.
Yeah, and not just students. I mean, we'll talk a bit later about transition, but I assume PAs that are practicing in other areas, if they're looking for a switch, and they haven't considered psych, maybe it's something to think about. That's why we're here today, to talk about it. So tell me about the patient population you see. Do you have a specific population, or do you just see kind of all ages?
Yeah, so I do adults, and we're a private practice outpatient clinic. So I think, our payer mix ends up being about 50% Medicare, and then the remainder is a combination of Medicaid and private pay. So in my clinic, I'm predominantly doing outpatient med management. So we're seeing patients for about 15 to 20 minutes, managing their medications, checking in on how they're doing with therapy or the other psychosocial aspects of their treatment. But it's usually people that are depressed, bipolar, anxious.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that, because I think most people, when you think about being a provider in psych, I think about sitting there and listening to the patient for half hour, 45 minutes, talk about their struggles in life and what's, their things that they're having difficulty with. But that's more the therapist's side. So oftentimes, like the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, the psychiatrist is doing the med management, the psychologist is doing the more therapy side. So when you're a PA or an NP working in psych, I assume that you could do either, but most of the time it ends up being med management.
Yeah, I think so. I think modern mental health, and one of the big reasons for it is just out of necessity. There's such a shortage of mental health providers, which is a great reason for PAs to get into it, because I think we're really well suited in our training being more on the medical model to do med management and have a good understanding of psychopharmacology, but there's just not enough prescribers. So it's very rare to have, whether it be a psych NP, PA, or psychiatrist in a role where they're doing 45-minute or 1-hour sessions.
What does your day look like as far as the hours that you work, the number of patients you see, how long you get with each patient?
Sure. So I work banker's hours. It's quite nice. So private practice outpatient. So I generally do 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then I take a half day Friday, and I don't work nights, I don't work weekends, and I don't take call. So it's lovely, but usually I do anywhere from 15 to 20-minute appointments. So I'll see 3 to 4 patients an hour. So on an average day, I'll see anywhere from maybe 15 to 18 patients for med management, and then usually anywhere from 10 to 15 patients for ketamine or one of the other interventional services. And those visits are usually me just checking in the room because the nurses or support staff are running the treatment. So I'm just checking in, saying, okay, you can start the treatment, and then of course coming in if there's any issues or concerns during the treatment. But so on an average day, I interact with anywhere from about 20 to 25 patients.
So do you find that PAs and NPs have a lot of autonomy in psych?
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful place to work as a APP. So in my clinical setting, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been with the same collaborative physician. Our medical director is incredible. He's a mentor and has taught me, much of what I know in terms of how I practice clinically. And it really is a great collaborative relationship. I think there's a ton of autonomy. Most of the people in our clinic carry their own panels of patients. So we're all managing our own patient caseload, but then we have the ability to check in with the medical director when we need it. And I think that's really the best, most purest form of collaborative practice for PAs or NPs, where we have autonomy within our, scope, but then are able to all self-assess and recognize when we may have a case that is more complex and needs that higher level of acuity or knowledge that comes from our medical director who's been doing this for 40 years.
For psych, I don't, I never ask people to tell us exactly how much you make or anything, but is there a salary range that you can give us just to give people an idea of what they might be looking if they're moving into psych?
So I would say, that the salaries are going to be higher than the average. Just to give a range, I think PA is a little bit different than NP, because if you are an NP, typically to work in psych, you have to go get your PHMNP, the mental health specialty certificate. There's a lot of letters in it. So if you have your mental health specialty certificate, for NPs, salary is highly variable, because I know there's some places that start psych NPs, like in Ohio, where things are very different. They'll start in the 90s, but then there's other places where NPs will start in the 150s or 160s. So it's very dependent on demand. In psychiatry, prescribers are geographically malappropriated. So the East Coast has a very, very high representation of psychiatrists, where the West has almost no psychiatrists. So if you go out to the Pacific Northwest as a PA or an NP in psychiatry, you're going to do really, really well financially. And similarly, if you're in more rural markets, it depends on the situation, because Medicaid reimbursement for mental health is highly variable. But a lot of times, if you get away from those big cities, the money is actually quite good. For PAs, it is a little bit different, because some employers will be a little bit gun shy to throw big bucks around for PAs, because we don't right out of the bat have specific psych training. I'd say national average, if I were to ballpark it, and this is just off the top of my head, I would say that a psych PA or a psych NP could expect to make anywhere from 125 to 160.
Do you find that psych then is very NP heavy? And is it hard for PAs to get in, or do you kind of feel like it's a good mix?
Yeah, so I think the most recent statistic that I've seen is that there's about 22,000 psych nurse practitioners, And I think we're up to about 2,000 psych PAs. So it's a 90% NP.
Yeah.
So it is something where it's NP dominant, but I don't necessarily think that that's a barrier for PAs to enter. And if there's PAs that are watching this that are interested in psych, I would encourage you to apply to psych NP jobs, because a lot of times if the field is 90% NP, 10% PA, recruiters are making up these job descriptions for 90% of the market. So they're not necessarily against PAs taking that role, but they're just not aware that PAs work in psych or, have never encountered one.
So let's get into things about this specialty that have been, first, a surprise for you. What kind of things were different than what you expected going in?
Oh, man. So I think things that are unexpected in psychiatry, the first one is probably not unique to psych, it's everyone is, and I'm sure you had the same experience, is you don't realize how much paperwork is involved in medicine. Invariably, you end up having a lot of prior authorizations, things like that. Very often in psychiatry, you're doing disability forms for your patients. So I wouldn't want to say it's more paperwork burden than other fields, because I think unfortunately every field of medicine is just completely bogged down in paperwork, but it is a lot. In psychiatry, it's not unexpected, but maybe the hard part is you listen to a lot of really tragic things every day. And I think burnout can be a big problem. So early on in psychiatry, you have to figure out a way to really separate home life and work life, because every single day at work, you're hearing about divorces, death, suicides, abuse, just really the hardest parts of humanity. And it's exciting that you can help people at their darkest or more vulnerable times, but at the same time, it can really weigh on you if you're not careful. So I think just going into it, being very aware that it's a hard field emotionally and that you have to have some level of separation, because if you're taking that home with you every night, it's going to be hard on you. I think it's a very exciting time to be in psychiatry, because for decades we had just the same old meds. We had SSRIs, SNRIs, antipsychotics, and even when new stuff came out, it was just kind of carbon clones or, oh, well, we changed this slightly. But now we've have some true, real innovative things that are happening.
People might worry about that their patients may be dangerous in some aspect, or, you wonder if patients get fixated on you or stalking, those kind of things. What has been your experience, and what do you have to say about those things?
Yeah, I think generally our stigma of mental health is overblown, and we probably are more scared than we need to be. So the vast majority of patients with mental health issues, which truly is, a good chunk of America. So just as an example, generalized anxiety disorder is the most common mental health condition, and it's 50 million Americans. So that's almost 1 in 5, 1 in 6. Depression similarly is something that in your lifetime, an average person has a 1 in 5 chance of having a major depressive episode throughout their life. So, these are your neighbors. These are the people you're going to church with. These are the people that you work with, that you go to school with. These are not necessarily, dangerous felons. I mean, if you're doing prison medicine, maybe. But a lot of times I think we think of mental health as this, scary place to be because the patients are so disturbed. And that's really not the case. A lot of times these are people just like you and I, lawyers, PAs, nurses, teachers that are just struggling. Patients with mental illness, even when we're talking about severe mental illness like schizophrenia, are far more likely to be victims of violence than to perpetrate violence themselves. So we want to make sure that as providers, we're not perpetuating that stereotype or that stigma by considering them, dangerous or things like that. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take precaution. Like in our office, the waiting room, you can't get back to the provider offices without a key fob. So you can't have patients just walk in. Just little things that I think everybody in healthcare should do.
Tell me the good things. Tell me what you love about psych.
So selfishly, we'll start with, as a career, why do we like it? So the reason I love psychiatry is the hours are great, the pay is good, it provides a work-life balance that I think is just unmatched. I would be hard pressed to find someone with better work-life balance than psychiatry and medicine. Psychiatry provides a level of autonomy and collegiality between professions that is also unmatched in any other field. So it gives you a really rewarding career. Beyond that, more altruistically, I love psychiatry because it allows you to have these incredible longitudinal relationships with patients at such a deep level. So I have patients that I've been seeing for 10 years that we see each other monthly or we see each other every month. So that's significant. And when I started seeing them, they were in high school, and now they're, graduated from college and married and having babies. I have, patients that I've seen and we've gone through, divorce together. We've gone through death of loved ones or spouses together. So you get to just have these incredible experiences with patients that are just rewarding. They're emotionally trying and difficult, but just so amazing on the other side when patients are going through what may be the toughest time of their life, and you can be there to help stabilize that and help be a positive influence. And then when you see them emerge on the other side and have success, it's just incredible.
What kind of unique opportunities do you feel is in psych?
Great question. So I think psychiatry offers an incredible amount of opportunity. And one of the big reasons for it, in my opinion, is because there is such a shortage of providers. There's that collegial relationship, where I don't think there's as much of the turf war between physicians, NPs, PAs, psychologists. Everyone is kind of under the understanding that we're all moving in the same direction. We all are trying to help address this immense need of patients. Because of that, though, I think there's an incredible opportunity for PAs or NPs that pursue careers in psychiatry to pick up moonlighting. I know of several providers that moonlight and do psych consultations in nursing homes. So there's lots of opportunity for per diem clinical work, just because there is more demand than supply for providers. So there's always opportunities to do more than your 9-to-5 job. There's also opportunities for pharmaceutical consulting. I do a ton of consulting with the pharmaceutical industry. One recent company that I work for told me that 50% of their prescriptions come from PAs and NPs. So we're reaching the tipping point in psychiatry where not only do non-physician providers have a very large presence, but we're almost becoming the majority. So as that happens, there's yet even more opportunity for our voices to be heard, for us to have a seat at the table as a decision maker in industry.
I often think of psych and telemedicine. It seems like that is the specialty that is most suited for telehealth.
Yeah, I'd say in my clinic, still about 50% of our visits are done via telehealth. So it allows us to meet patients where they're at. It allows us to see patients in the comfort of their home. Very often patients with anxiety or agoraphobia may not come in. So those patients in the past may not have gotten treatment. They may have just gone without, and now we can see those patients and hopefully help give them a more fulfilled quality of life. So I hope that telemedicine is here to stay. It certainly has been something that has become a mainstay in our practice. And I do agree, psychiatry is really well suited for it. We're not doing physical exams on these patients, we're talking to them. So that's something that I can do in person, but also from 500 miles away.
Yeah. And this may be putting you on the spot a little bit, and I don't know if you have any idea about it, but PAs or NPs opening their own clinics.
I think psychiatry is one of the last remaining fields of medicine that is not being taken over by big corporate entities. As the rest of medicine gets taken over by giant health systems, psychiatry is the last remaining one where a lot of times psychiatry is done in little tiny private practices with 1 or 2 providers where maybe the owner's wife is also the checkout person. And it's wonderful because that's how mental health should be. It's hard to do mental health in a very big corporate setting because really the primary purpose of mental health treatment is making that connection with the patient, making sure that the patient is comfortable and trusts their treatment team with their vulnerabilities and deep, dark fears and secrets. So I think it is a great opportunity for PAs and NPs. In most states, you can own a practice as a PA or an NP. Some states are different than others, so always, consult a lawyer and make sure. But even in states that are not friendly to PA or NP practice ownership, there are all ways that you can do it. So I do think it's a wonderful setting. There's not a whole lot of practice overhead. If you're in psychiatry, in theory, you could do telemedicine, you could get malpractice, you could hang your shingle, have a medical director, have a collaborating physician. I always recommend it, even if it's an independent practice state, have someone to call if you need help. But it's a very low barrier to entry. You don't have to buy very expensive equipment for your exam room. You need a couple chairs and a computer and some office space. So it's for people that have dreams of practice ownership. It really is a great field for that.
Yeah. After years of experience.
After years of experience, exactly. Make sure that you are a competent clinician before you strike out on your own. And if you strike out on your own, make sure that you understand that everybody has limits. Nobody has an unlimited scope of practice. So if you're going to be practicing solo, you need to have a really good awareness of where your limits are and then what you're going to do when patients exceed that. Who are you going to call? How are you going to refer? You need to make sure that you're very comfortable with that before you own your own practice.
If people are watching this and they're a student, they haven't gone through rotations yet, I always ask what rotations other than, the psych specific rotation is most helpful.
All of them. Truly. So I think if you know that you want to go into psychiatry, one of the best things of clinical rotations, especially when you're going through all the different fields of medicine, is that every single rotation is going to teach you how to interview patients. They're going to teach you how to connect with patients. They're going to teach you how to empathize with patients at their most vulnerable times. If you are a student and you know psychiatry is something that really interests me, what I would recommend is try to work with your program to identify maybe offices or practices that are looking to hire. I don't care where you're going to school. In your area, there is going to be someone that is looking to hire a Psych PA or an NP. And if the school is, struggling to find that, just go onto a job board, go onto Indeed.com, LinkedIn, any of these, and look for job listings for Psych NPs or Psych PAs. Contact the office, let them know, hey, I'm a student, I'm graduating in January of 23. I'm really interested in psych. I wondered if I could do a month-long rotation with you. As an employer, because the past 2 hires we've had here are both former students. I get a free month-long interview with you. So my goodness, I'm going to be totally on board with having to come in and rotate if we're looking to hire. So I think
and the student gets a month-long ability to see if that's a clinic that they want to work in.
Correct. Absolutely right.
It's a win-win. But what about if somebody is already a working PA or an NP and they feel like that they want to transition into psych? I guess for the NPs, their path would be to go get the mental health specific NP certification. But any advice for PAs who are already practicing but maybe want to transition into psych?
Sure. I think step one is network. There's tons of jobs out there because there's just not enough psych prescribers. So the big thing would be is identify if there's any local psychiatry, membership associations or groups in the area, but also just start looking for practices. If you want to work in an inpatient setting or an outpatient, start talking to people. If someone were to call my office and say, hey, I am a dermatology PA and I really have an interest in psych, are you guys hiring or do you know? If we're not looking for someone, at the minimum, I could give you 3 different office contacts that are looking for someone. Now, just realize that coming into it, if you have 5 years of dermatology experience, from a psych perspective, you're a new grad. Psychiatry is a very, very specific field of medicine. There's a high learning curve. Now, it's different if you come in with family med experience or something that maybe has a lot of that psychiatry like we just talked about. But the level of experience really is going to be what dictates salary. So if I have someone coming into my clinic that has 5 years of derm experience, they're not going to get a salary that's commensurate with a derm PA with 5 years of experience. They're going to get probably a new grad salary offer. That shouldn't dissuade people from doing that, but just know that going into it, you may end up having to take a sacrifice on salary to initially start. But thankfully in psychiatry, once you gain that experience, you become immensely valuable and your salary should rise quite quickly.
Any places that you would point people for resources or societies or anything to help them bulk up their knowledge and get ready to make that transition?
Yeah, so I think the 3 that I would point out, if you're interested in psych or maybe you've made the transition, but you need to start a study plan of how to become a good psych provider. One is associations. So there's a association of psych PAs that's very good. There's some wonderful Facebook groups that have some excellent discussion and a lot of really great psych PAs that are willing to give career support. Similarly, there's a Psych NP National Association that has a lot of great resources, lots of good Facebook groups as well. Beyond that, I think there's really good CME companies. Psych Congress is a medical education company that has a lot of free content online. They also have annual conferences that are great opportunities to network and learn. And then NEI, the Neuroscience Education Institute, is a really wonderful education company. Similarly, has a lot of really great free resources, but then also paid CME content in conferences. So if you were interested in joining the psychiatry or making the transition, one option would be is go to a conference and start networking, start learning. If someone came into a job interview in my clinic and they said, I really want to work in psych, here is the CME or here are the certificate programs I've already completed. To me, the 10 hours of CME that you've done isn't necessarily going to be, oh my goodness, they're ready to practice. But it shows me that you're committed. It shows me this is the field I want to be in. And here's all the steps that I'm taking to get there. That's a big deal. So I think just identifying those resources online, but yeah, social media is great. LinkedIn's great. Facebook is great. Start identifying people that are already in psych and just pick their brains.
So you mentioned new grads. There are some specialties that I think are really hard for new grads to go into, but do you feel like psych is a good option for new grads if they're interested in it?
I think psychiatry is an excellent field to go into as a new grad if you are going into the right setting, because it is a steep learning curve. And regardless of how much psychiatry education you did in PA or NP school, it's still going to be just a tiny sliver of what's needed. So having the right setting where you can have good mentorship, where you can have, people around you that are more experienced to train you, but also to be there and support you and bounce ideas off of is a really wonderful thing. So if you can find that practice setting that will give you the ability to grow and evolve and mature as a provider, then psych is a great opportunity for a new grad.
Yeah, great. So anything else that you think somebody should know or that you want to tell them about psych if they're considering it?
In summary, my big takeaways are that psychiatry is great. I think it's not a field that we should overlook, either because of stigmatization of the patients or just because there's not as many PAs in it as other fields. And consider applying for jobs even if they don't list PA, because a lot of times those jobs are going to be very open to PAs and just aren't aware that we are in this field.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that one. Okay, I want to talk now about something else that you're doing. You mentioned earlier that you started, right, the White Coats of the Round Table. I have to keep looking at it. White Coats of the Round Table. So tell us what that is and what you're doing with it and what your plans are with it.
There's a lot of really great resources for healthcare professionals clinically. If you want to become a good psych PA or NP, you can find lots of stuff online to help you get there. But there's not as much in terms of resources for having a fulfilling and rewarding career in healthcare. So there's really not a whole lot that tells you, hey, what do I do if I'm feeling burned out? Or I need to switch, I need to get out of clinical medicine. What options are there for me? I'm a 1099 contractor. I've never done this before. What do I need to know? So our goal with White Coats of the Round Table is not only to create a podcast that is, hopefully enjoyable. Our goal is to tackle maybe dry topics such as independent contracting, mentorship in the workforce, but do so in an entertaining way, but then also provide valuable resources, continue to build a database of resources for professionals so that when you have, a situation where maybe you're starting to feel burned out by clinical medicine, you don't feel stuck. You have something to turn to where you can identify, careers in academia, careers in medical writing, careers as an MSL. So it's exciting seeing what you're doing, Michelle, too, because I think we both identified that one way to combat burnout is through education, is that we can teach people, hey, you're not stuck. You've got a really, really valuable skill set that can translate into health tech, or that can translate into teaching, even if it's not PA school or NP school. Right. So just bringing this information to people, making them aware of it is the goal with the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So where do people go if they want to hear your podcast?
Yeah, so we're on all major streaming platforms. So if you just Google or you go to your favorite streaming platform and search White Coats of the Round Table, you'll find us. And then for more information, you can also go to whitecoatsoftheroundtable.com. Right now, we've got the podcast, but our goal down the road is to certify for CME, so that if you listen to the podcast, you'll also be able to get CME credit for it. Right. And then down the road, we'll see where this takes us, but we want to just continue to build more resources to help people in their careers.
Well, thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciated your time, and I loved hearing a different perspective on psych.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, I have to admit, Mike did not necessarily sell me 100% on psych, but he really has changed my thinking about it. And I can see how this can be a great specialty for people. But how about you? What did you think about it? Did he change any of your preconceived notions or change your mind about what you thought psych was like? Or do you work in psych and maybe have some different perspectives that you'd like to share? Put that down below in the comment section and let me know. If you're still looking and want to hear about more specialties, then you can watch these videos here or go to my main channel page and look at the videos in my different playlists. Thanks again for joining me. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.